Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless owner. Careful, careful, careful. Maybe not your fearless owner. I'm sorry for the hate language out of the jump. I am your fearless leader / owner, Clay Travis of Outkick the Show. I hope all of you are having fantastic Thursdays wherever across this great land you may be. We have got a lot to get to today. I took a couple of days off. I've been working on a lot of things behind the scenes. But we're off and rolling here. I hope you guys will be entertained. We're going to talk about the 75th anniversary of D-Day. The Raptors-Warriors game last night. Blues-Bruins tonight, Game 5. The Kyle Lowry shove that has launched 1,000 NBA ships. Beyoncé fans losing their minds over Beyoncé's face during a game. And the word owner potentially being banned by the NBA. Because it's racially insensitive. All that plus the NBA ratings absolutely tank as they hit a 12-year low last night. What is underway? How are they all attached in any way? I will dive in and I am going to tell you a ton about a lot of different subjects. But I want to start with D-Day, 75th anniversary of D-Day. 2 years ago, I was fortunate enough to get to go to Normandy. I spent all day going around to the beach, the different beaches in Normandy. We had a tour guide walking us through everything that happened on June 6, 1944. 75 years later, there are all sorts of commemorations going on in Normandy, including this is one of the coolest things I've seen, a 97-year-old man who parachuted in at the age of 22. He parachuted in again at the age of 97. 75 years after he jumped out of an airplane and parachuted into Normandy, he did it again as a 97-year-old. Now, one of the things that I would hope that all of you will have the opportunity to do at some point in your lives, if you are if you're interested in history at all, even if you're not interested in history, is stand on the beaches of Normandy and look out at the ocean from those cliffs and think to yourself, my God, I cannot believe what these young guys did from America, from Canada, from Britain, small number from France, from Australia. They walked directly into death at the hands of Nazis. We spend a lot of time, I feel like, in America in 2019 talking about America not being a good place. I think that is often far exaggerated. I think America is the greatest country that has ever existed in the history of the world. I think we protected the cradle of Western civilization 75 years ago by going toe-to-toe with true evil. It's possible without America that the Nazis would still exist and still be an empire at this day and age. We defeated the biggest threat to the world in the 20th century, and without us, the Nazis would have triumphed. And so when you stand on that coast and you look out at the ocean and you think about the bravery of those boys, and almost all of them were boys, 18, 19, 20-year-olds from rural areas, from cities, volunteering to fight against Hitler's Germany. And the fact that they were on those boat transports and they were in the airplanes, and if you were on the tie line jumping off into Normandy, you were watching the men in front of you get riddled with bullets, and do you know what you did? You still jumped because you knew what your duty was, and because you believed in something larger than yourself. You believed in the triumph and the importance of freedom. And you believed it so much that you were willing to put your life on the line. And when you stepped out of those transports in that cold, high water, with bullets riddling the ocean around you, with blood everywhere, with explosions, with absolute carnage in every direction you looked, and you got out and you looked up at those cliffs, and not only did you have to get across the beach, open, wide spaces on that beach. You had to get to that cliff and you had to climb all the way to the top of it. And when you got to the top of that cliff, you had to fight Nazis there. Sometimes, like at Pointe du Hoc, for 2.5 straight days. They fought Nazis. And it gets me really fired up, and I am filled with pride, but I am also filled with absolute indignation that now the grandsons and granddaughters, great-grandsons and great-granddaughters, many of them, the heirs of the lineage of those who stormed the beaches at Normandy, sit around on social media and call people who they disagree with Nazis. And the media lets that happen. And we have so popularized the term Nazi for anybody who disagrees with us that in the process over the last 75 years, we have completely forgot what pure evil actually looks like and what true destruction is when you gaze upon it. These men were so stone cold brave that they actually fought Nazis, and now their progeny sit around on social media calling people they disagree with Nazis and trying to get political opinions that they don't agree with banned and calling all sorts of absurdity to themselves, and very few people actually call them out on it. They were the greatest generation. They did things that I'm not sure our current generation would be capable of. They stood up to actual evil. They freed a continent. They freed a world. And we should forever be in our debt to them. Because of what they did, gives everybody today the freedom to sit around and gripe and whine and bitch and complain about relatively insignificant things. There's a lot of people in America today who want to sell you on the idea that the United States in 2019 is not a good place. I say to them, they are full of complete crap. The United States is and always has been since its founding the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest steward and protector of human rights and human values and all of the gleaming examples of Western civilization to ever exist. I hope that we always will be. But I swear to you, if you stand on those cliffs and look out at that sea, you will never, ever again appreciate or allow anyone in your presence to say anything other than America saved the world before and we can do it again. And also, you will not believe and you will not allow to be uttered in your presence the fact that we are actually in any kind of danger in this country today. We had elections in 1864 during the Civil War. We had elections in 1944 during the actual war, World War II. Whatever happens in 2020, despite what people will try to say to you, despite all the fear-mongering that is about to come, pales into comparison to what we have been through in the past. I believe that America's better days are still ahead of it, but we have to continue to be vigilant and fight against people who would try to turn us into the places that we have before beaten. I love all of you. I wanted to start off with that. If you know anyone who fought in World War II, this is one of the last chances you'll ever have to thank them. When I was a kid, a lot of my great uncles had all fought in the war. You don't necessarily realize what a big deal it was when you were a kid. I remember my great uncle saying that he was in Patton's army, and as they marched across France, I believe it was, he was a kid from Tennessee, and he was standing along the line, and here comes George Patton in his Jeep, roaring down, stops, starts to survey all the men who line up around him, and he stopped in front of my great uncle, and he said, my grandmother's brother, and he said to him, I remember him telling me this story, he said, hey kid, where are you from? He said, Tennessee. He said, have you killed any Germans yet? He said, no. And Patton said, well, you'll get your chance, son. You will get your chance. And everybody went crazy all around George Patton. It's amazing to think about what those men did. It's amazing to think about the number of them that did not come back. If you've ever been to Normandy and you get to go to that cemetery, thousands and thousands of rows, all identical, all kids, all young people who were at the very beginning of their life that gave the full measure to beat Nazis. And I just don't think we can speak enough about how legendary their performance was and is, and I think in the years to come, what they did is going to become even more impressive. And I think it's a very important part of American history. And I think for a lot of us out there who are American history studiers, who enjoy the process of looking into our country's past, we have done an incredibly bad job allowing our country's history to be sabotaged and sold as a bad story as opposed to a heroic one. I think today everybody out there should give as much praise and as much recognition and acknowledgement as you can to the people who stormed the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. All right, much less serious discussion. All right, much less serious discussion. Yesterday we had Game 3 of the NBA Finals, Raptors-Warriors. And here's the thing. As much as I want to buy into what's going to happen based on the first 3 games that I saw in Raptors-Warriors, I can't. Because we don't know what's going to happen with Kevin Durant, and we don't know what's going to happen with Klay Thompson. To me, this series is still very simple. If the Warriors get healthy, they win. If the Warriors don't get healthy, they're going to lose. If Klay Thompson comes back in Game 4 alongside of Kevin Durant, I think the Warriors win Game 4. They're then in a 3-game playoff. The Warriors are better than the Raptors. They have better talent. I believe they will go on and win the championship, even though they have to win at least 1 game in Toronto. But if those guys don't come back, then Toronto wins. And to me, it's not that exciting of a series to talk about because it's so rooted into injury. But I would say in a larger scale, what we're looking towards happening, I believe, is if Kevin Durant comes back and rescues the Golden State Warriors, then I believe what will happen is Kevin Durant will stay in the Bay Area and the Warrior dynasty will continue. And regardless, I now believe that Kawhi Leonard will stay in Toronto because if you look at Pascal Siakam and everything else, this is one of the best possible scenarios and situations for Raptor fans because they can grow with Kawhi Leonard, get him to sign on for a couple of more years. So I think the real storyline here that is worth following, that is intriguing, that is utterly fascinating is, has the way this is played out. Kevin Durant comes back, leads the Warriors to a championship, then he is the reason they won a championship. There's no reason to run somewhere else to win a championship. I think he stays there. If this ends up happening, then there's not going to be much drama in the offseason from the NBA, and I think this is going to be an overall mess for the league because they've sold this idea of, oh, free agency is coming. It's going to fundamentally alter the trajectory of power in the NBA. A lot more teams are going to be good. And what's going to happen is basically the same teams are going to be good, and that's going to continue. So I believe that this is all worth paying attention to, but the series itself is not very entertaining, which is why the 2 top stories coming out of Game 3 have to do with what happened in the crowd. First of all, you have one of the minority owners. Minority owner. He's in trouble by in and of itself. A minority owner of the Warriors gave a light shove to Kyle Lowry. I think this is absolutely insane. Okay, that this is somehow turned into a story. NBA players are so soft. Kyle Lowry dives into the crowd. One of the owners of the Warriors, probably not happy about the fact that Kyle Lowry dove into him and his wife, gives Kyle Lowry a small shove. It's almost nothing. It's almost nothing. And now people are losing their mind. They're like, oh, you have to go out and you have to sell. You have to go out and you have to sell the team now. Like, so that's what some people are arguing. Get out of here. This is so stupid. Let me ask you this question. If one of the Warrior players had run in, and people are like, oh, he has to be banned for life from the NBA. If one of the Warrior players had run into Drake in the exact same measure, and Drake had shoved that player in the exact same way, is anybody out there going to argue that Drake has to be banned from the NBA for the rest of his life? Would one single person make that argument? If that exact same situation happens, is there any way on the planet that they would argue, oh my God, Drake has to be banned from NBA arenas for the rest of his life? There's no way that would happen. There's no earthly way that would happen. Drake got into a yelling match with Draymond Green after Game 1, and no one even blinked. Meanwhile, now somebody says one mean thing to a player, and they're like, that person has to be banned out of the arena for the rest of their life. This is a bad scenario for the NBA, okay? Because what it does is it continues, and I want to connect these stories, this absurdity of the concept that the word owner needs to be banned. Ultimately, what has happened, I believe, in many respects, is players have forgotten how they get paid, right? It's important, no matter what you do for a living, to remember where your salary comes from. If you are a professional athlete, your salary comes from where? Fans. Ultimately, when you dive right into the root of it, your salary all comes from fans. And the biggest threat that I believe exists right now is that there is a major issue with the disconnect between the fans who pay players' salaries and the players themselves. The NFL got caught in this mess. The NFL allowed football to become politicized for way too long. 2 years, their ratings tanked, fans tuned out, and it was an unmitigated disaster. Then they had a meeting with NBC, CBS, Fox, and ESPN, and they said, guys, let's just get back to playing football. And what happened? Everybody came in, and everybody was really rolling, right? This was a big-time growth industry in the NFL. And this now is what I think the NBA is going to deal with if they get too woke. Guys, I put up a poll on my Twitter feed at Clay Travis, and I said, is the term owner racially insensitive in your opinion? And I was like, I'm curious, what's the reaction? And the answer was 96% of people said no. Do you know how hard with 40,000 voters it is to get 96% agreement that something is ludicrous and ridiculous? It's almost impossible. Newsflash, you are an idiot of the highest order if you don't understand the difference between someone who owns a team and slavery. All of this is coming out of Draymond Green sitting around in the barbershop, and Draymond Green is not the intellectual leader that this country needs to be following, okay? You own your home. You might well own a lawnmower. You own your dog. If you found a business like I have, you also own your business. None of that is racially insensitive. In fact, it's the exact opposite. I'm telling you that what should happen is everybody who had this idea and entertained it in a legitimate fashion at the NBA office should be fired for stupidity because they're not smart enough to tell a dumb person that's a dumb idea, we're not going to listen to it. The term owner should be aspired to by everyone who lives in a capitalistic society. You should want to own your home. You should want to own the products inside your home. You should want to own a business. You should want to own stock in companies. This is an ownership-based society. The more you own, the more power and success you have, the better chances of success your children and your family have. If anything, the concept of ownership should be aspired to. Wait a minute. It is. LeBron James owns a stake in Liverpool. In his Twitter and Instagram bio, it says he owns a stake in the team. Michael Jordan was so successful that he bought an NBA team. That is the aspirational goal that everyone should hope to attain. Rise to the level of where you become an owner. Don't sit around perpetually triggered over words that have nothing to do with history of slavery. The word owner far predates the concept of slavery even existing. If the team owners were called masters, maybe I would take a step back. And if the players were called servants, maybe I would take a step back and reconsider this. But this is idiocy. And to me, it's a sign of the NBA leaning so much into woke culture that even people who are in woke culture are like, this is utterly ridiculous. I have said this for a long time. Most employees don't think like owners. If you are an employee and you want to one day be an owner, you have to aspire to dominating this process, right? Whatever you do for a living, if you want to one day end up in the ownership position, you have to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like someone who actually aspires to ownership. Far from being a bad word, the word owner is one of the greatest words in a democracy founded on capitalism. This, to me, is a sign of utter weakness. We are creating a generation that is the exact opposite of the generation that marched into gunfire against the Nazis. We are creating a generation that is perpetually triggered, offended, and curls up in the fetal position every time something of word is said that makes them uncomfortable. We have to stop promoting the idea that words hurt you. We also have to stop promoting the idea that being a victim is something to be aspired to in this country. And so long as we continue to allow victims to be honored in this country, we are creating a soft society which is perpetually seeking the opportunity to be victimized. It is utterly absurd. There's no way to defend it, and this is the latest example of it. If you are an intelligent owner, regardless of where your business is, regardless of where you make a living, you should be disgusted by the absurdity of statements like these. You need to stand up against them and fight them back. What would I do in this Kyle Lowry situation? I think it's pretty straightforward. You can suspend the guy for the rest of the finals like you did. If somebody wants to buy his ownership stake and make him tons of money, the guy is worth $2 billion. It's going to have almost no impact on his life, okay? I think that players need to toughen up. Again, I would just ask you the question. If the exact same scenario happens, and instead of Kyle Lowry running into the Golden State Warrior crowd, it's, I don't know, Steph Curry running into the Toronto Raptors crowd, and Drake shoves Curry in the exact same manner and they have words, is anyone out there arguing that Drake needs to be banned from the NBA for the rest of his life? No. We got to stop this absurdity of banning fans for the rest of their lives. First of all, I don't think it's possible. Secondly, it's all reactionary and absurd, and it's predicated on allowing social media to direct your attention. The Cubs banned the guy for the OK sign. I, first of all, don't even buy into the fact that fans are getting banned. Secondly, I think it's patently absurd that we're at this place where we're so soft in society. Sometimes fans misbehave. You can kick them out if you want to. You should kick them out of an individual game, and then hopefully they'll learn their lesson. If you kick them out of multiple games, maybe you can try and ban them. But this thing is ridiculous. This thing is utterly ridiculous the way it's played out. And so is this Beyoncé story. Did you guys see this? This is a sign of, by the way, why the NBA is trending down. Even though people like to say, oh, the NBA is on fire. It's all off-the-court related drama that doesn't have anything to do with the product itself. Beyoncé made a face at some woman who was leaning over to give Jay-Z a vodka soda, and she asked him if he wanted a lime because it was loud. She was leaning over, and she's getting death threats all over social media. She's also an owner's wife. This is utterly absurd. I mean, I really do think that 40 years from now, we're going to look back on the social media era and say that social media might well have been the worst thing that ever happened in terms of media in this country, because it's created absolute absurdity. I think it has led to a disastrous level of division in the country, and it's led to a complete focus on things that aren't really that important in the grand scheme of things, and also a perpetual search for people to blame. The internet has become, thanks to social media, a blame factory. Think about it. Something happens, and immediately people want to assess blame. They want to then assess blame and go to the most punitive actions imaginable in an effort to search and examine what should happen. It's a one big blame factory, and frankly, I'm over it. Now, I also think this is starting to rebound and create an issue for the NBA. The NBA ratings hit a 12-year low this year. And for people out in Game 3, They were down 19% in game 1. They were down 20% in game 2. They were down 21% in game 3. That's because the NBA has a player people care about, LeBron James, and a team people care about, the Golden State Warriors. If the Warriors weren't here and they had lost to the Rockets, or they had lost to the Clippers, or they had lost to the Trailblazers, ratings would be down 50%. The NBA has one player people care about, and they have one team people care about. When LeBron leaves, the NBA is in significant trouble. There are going to be major issues facing this league and its television partners who have drastically overpaid. Now, people out there want to say, oh, Canada matters, Canada matters. If the Raptors were playing against the Trailblazers this year, ratings would be down 50% in the NBA. That doesn't happen in the Super Bowl. It doesn't happen in the World Series. It doesn't happen in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The NBA has a lot of casual fans who come in based on the superstar factor. The most watched NBA game of all time was in 1998. Ever since then, ratings are down substantially. In fact, think about this. Ratings are down over the last 20 years in the NBA, 66% since Michael Jordan played. This year compared to when Michael Jordan played. 2/3 of all basketball fans have stopped watching, despite the fact that the overall population has gone up by 50 million in this country. The NBA has got a real issue that they need to solve. To the NFL's credit, they solved when their ratings collapsed. The NBA is staring right in the face of LeBron James leaving. LeBron leaving is not going to be as bad as Michael Jordan, but the height of LeBron James hasn't been anywhere near as high as the height of Michael Jordan was. So when LeBron leaves, the NBA is going to have a major issue going forward. I'm not sure how they solve it. This is going to turn into, I think, a major issue going forward. And as a result, this is going to continue to grow into a massive issue. And it's also going to continue to illuminate what has become, I think, a glaring and substantial issue. Okay? And that is this. The players in pro sports are becoming less and less like the fans in pro sports. Okay? I want you to think about this for a minute. The salaries that players make have made them arrogant, dismissive, and completely unconnected to the people who pay their salaries. And as a result, this is going to continue to grow until the point that at some element of time, fans out there are going to move to other entertainment options. It is incredibly easy this point in time, compared to when we were kids, to sit around and watch Netflix, to sit around and watch Hulu, to sit around and watch every television show that has ever existed in the history of man, right? Basically, it's out there all available. You are not just competing with things that are on live television against you now. You are competing against everything in this world simultaneously. And that, my friend, is going to be a massive issue going forward. I think it's going to continue to grow. I'm going to have to go ahead and have some fun here. Let me go ahead and go full Clay Kyle and wipe out a bunch of people. All right? I'm going to wipe out a bunch of people like I am with the American troops on D-Day in Normandy. Everybody is going to get murdered here. For some reason, there are a lot of people coming in here and making arguments, and I'm about to wipe them out Clay Kyle style. And this is a lot of fun. One of my favorite things to do is every now and then pull out the gun and wipe out people, and they'll never be able to come in here again. And I am going to have ownership over them. Boom. That is Clay Kyle wiping you out. People are already running and hiding. They got nothing to do. I just had to look over, occasionally read a comment, and boom, you are gone forever. Forever. All right, appreciate all of you. If you like the show, share it. We'll be cutting it up as always. Also, I've got a new podcast. If you haven't heard New Wins and Losses podcast, it's long-form interviews. It's going to be phenomenal, I think, as we continue to grow. And so I would encourage all of you to make sure that you go listen to Jason Whitlock. It's outstanding. First one is up. The other one just went up with Shannon Terry. He is the first person that I can think of, maybe the only person, to sell multiple companies for $100 million or more. And so as a result, you are able to go listen to these, get some lessons. How do you create a $100 million business? He sold Rivals for $100 million plus. He sold 24/7 Sports for $100 million plus. You are going to absolutely love it. If you dive into those podcasts, make sure you subscribe. Wins and Losses with Clay Travis. I am Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. D-Day 75th anniversary. Remember, America saved this world. They saved Western civilization so people can sit around and bitch all day long about trivial, insignificant things in the greatest country of the world. Thank all those guys for what they did 75 years ago. They made all of our lives infinitely better, even if many of the young people in this country today are too dumb to understand what it was like to fight actual Nazis, as opposed to call people on the internet who you disagree with Nazis. Love you. My name is Clay Travis. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk then. This has been Outkick. Thanks, Facebook. Love you guys.